My grandparents loved me dearly. And as much as they loved me, they adored one another. It wasn't a surprise for anybody when, after my grandfather was diagnosed with dementia, my grandmother became his primary care partner. Very quickly, their world became about doctor's appointments and medications and set routines. What started to be missing were the things that they'd enjoyed together for decades: orchestra, the theater, and art museums. Museums are working to be inclusive spaces for all of our communities. But as somebody becomes older, they start to feel invisible, which only becomes more pronounced with a diagnosis of dementia. And this feeling of invisibility or being unwelcome isn't by any means special to my family. Many of us are familiar with these statistics. According to the Alzheimer's Association, over 5 million Americans live with Alzheimer's today, and that number is expected to triple by the year 2050. At the National Museum of Art, the University Art Museum on Duke's campus, we have started the Reflections program to invite visitors with dementia and their care partners into our spaces for engaging and appropriate conversations about the works of art. Our program started thanks to the leadership of the Museum of Modern Art, or MoMA, in New York City. Over a decade ago, they began inviting those with memory loss into their galleries, and the educators quickly realized how successful art was at engaging visitors with cognitive loss. They brought in researchers from NYU, and those researchers found that visitors on these tours had higher levels of quality of life, and that both the visitor with dementia and the care partner had higher self-assessments of happiness. The museum community quickly took notice, myself included. What wasn't surprising here was the idea that art was a powerful tool. Many of us are familiar with how art can transport us. It can take us to a new place. It can make us more empathetic for another person. It can also remind us of our own loved ones, favorite places, and experiences. The new information here was that art was a powerful tool for people with dementia. What we found was that engaging in the galleries allows people to be present and in the moment. We're looking at an object in front of us, which means that we're focused on the colors and the shapes and the subject matter. We're talking about something that's directly in the space with us. And over our 90 minutes together, we might only look at 3 or 4 works of art. Because everybody on the tour lives with dementia, any of the things that might happen, a forgotten word or an extended pause or the repetition of a phrase, all happen in a safe space. These tours are free of judgment and shame, which allows for everybody on the tour to relax and enjoy themselves in conversation with one another. The care partners who join us talk about how communicative somebody is at the museum. Somebody who at home might be sullen or quiet, on the tours engages and shares in new ways. Gail and Bill, who you see in the center of this image, are regular visitors on our tours. They've been coming monthly for the last 4 years, but it was after they first started visiting that Gail expressed surprise when Bill began to ask daily, "Is today a Nasher day?" Even with his dementia, he had formed a short-term memory where he understood the special experience that was happening together around art and was seeking that out on a daily basis. Another quote from Bill: "Everybody's got all these problems. And today we were laughing and we were having a good time, and we will come back next week remembering about today." Bill shared this quote with Caitlin Henderson, a graduate student at Duke, who did a short documentary about the Reflections program. And what I find most important about Bill's quote is that it's a reminder for those of us who don't have dementia that this isn't about what people can't do. This is about what people can do. The laughter, the time spent together, and the joy that people are still able to experience. When we're in the galleries, it's not necessary for people to have personal recollections or memories, and yet we oftentimes find that the art does bring that out in the moment. Looking at this seascape, one of our regular visitors, Edwin, began to share about his early life. He had grown up near the sea, he had been a sailor as a young man, and he talked at length about what we see in this image. He shared his concern for this boat on the water, worried that it wouldn't survive the crashing waves and swelling seas around it. This image allowed him to reconnect with that earlier self as his daughter listened on, visibly proud of her father's ability to be the expert. These are moments that our team can't plan for. We have no way of knowing where those connections will be made, and yet the art does it for us. Another important part of engagement is giving people the opportunity to create, to visually express themselves as well as communicating verbally on these tours. When we're making art, it can also be an opportunity for the care partners to better assess the skill set that their loved one still has. They might find that somebody's no longer able to use scissors or hold a paintbrush appropriately. But because we're in this safe shared space together, our team can help with how they can still express themselves. Perhaps they rip the paper or paint with a sponge or in their hands instead, still giving them ways to feel empowered and engaged in the experience. The art making also gives our group an opportunity to collaborate. Pairs work together as partners again. Rather than having one person providing care for another, they get to be teammates in the classroom, working on projects side by side. When we're making art, we often do very traditional mediums. We might use clay or paint, we might screen print, and while these are familiar things for those of us who work in art spaces, it's still very experimental for many of our visitors. Giving people a chance to explore and enjoy new things, even if we're printmaking with something as simple as vegetables and fruits. The time creating is also another opportunity for those of us without dementia to remember that this is about exploration and new experiences. Oftentimes, after a diagnosis, we start to think of people as what they're no longer capable of and forget that they are too able to learn and explore. Harold, who you see here in the blue stripes, is a regular visitor, and his wife Laura realized very quickly how much Harold was enjoying the art making. It led to her enrolling him in watercolor classes. He'd always been an avid bird lover, and he combined his love for birds with his new skill of painting and was honored at a library where he had his work exhibited and was celebrated at the opening reception. Music is something that we all recognize as being a very powerful medium. We can think about favorite songs from our childhood, from major moments in our lives, and much research has been done about how people with dementia can connect to music that's played for them. We incorporate music in the galleries, and the musicians connect the songs that they play to the art that we're looking at together. When we talk about music, our staff loves the story of Charles. Charles came on a tour during our Juan Miró exhibition. Miró was a Spanish artist, and for this particular program, we had a Spanish guitarist who was playing. As we entered into the space, Charles shared that he had been a drummer early in life. And the musician happened to have a drum with him and encouraged Charles to play alongside him. It was a beautiful moment. Charles flourished in the experience, and I wasn't surprised to see his wife in tears. I was surprised later that afternoon when she and I spoke, and she shared that she hadn't known about Charles's time as a musician. This was a second marriage for them both, and although they'd been together for the last 17 years, it wasn't something that she knew about her loved one. Again, we can't plan for these moments, and yet they're the magical things that happen when we bring people together around the arts. These times in the museum can be incredibly impactful for our visitors, but they aren't the only people who are influenced by the tours. Studies show that the staff members related to these programs oftentimes have much lower levels of stigma around people with dementia. And it's not only true for the educators who are giving the tours. Rather, the research shows that stigma levels drop for staff members at museums who are simply in the sphere of the programs. The security guards in the galleries, the front desk staffs, others who have the opportunity to observe and join these tours show lower levels of stigma and higher expectations of what people with dementia are capable of doing. This is especially important for those of us who work at university art museums. We have students at the undergraduate and graduate level who are part of these tours. We have medical students who engage with this program, and they will leave our campus to go into communities and careers where they have the expectation that people with dementia are capable of learning and enjoying in public spaces. Another quote from one of our visitors: "The art and music were wonderful, but even better was the chance to be out with others who are in the same or a similar situation as we are." One of the important things that museums are doing here is that they're creating normalizing experiences for visitors. As with my grandparents, after a diagnosis of dementia, a person's social circle can constrict tightly. Being able to go into the galleries and engage with staff members and other visitors and friends on these tours allows for an expanding of that social circle and a more normal experience for everyone involved. As we look at our time together in the galleries, we also think about how these visitors are carrying their experience with them throughout the day. So some folks might create new memories. They might have the opportunity to reflect back on their experience later, even with their short-term memory disappearing. Others are not going to remember their time in the galleries, but what they will remember is that positive feeling. Scientific studies have shown us that the residual emotion of the good experience together extends throughout the day. Thinking about our own experiences, if we bump into a friend and have a conversation, if we hear a favorite piece of music or create a work of art, we continue to have the good feelings that were created for hours after the initial experience. The same is true for people with memory loss. It doesn't require short-term memory for people to have that positive emotion throughout the day. There are over 35,000 museums in our country. About 1,600 of those are on university campuses. As of today, approximately 200 to 300 are offering dementia programs. That is less than 1% of the museums countrywide. It also means that many of these programs aren't available in communities and aren't available even in some states. Where there are programs, a successful tour requires having a small group size. So even having 1 or 2 programs within a community doesn't mean that our entire need is being served. Instead, it's going to require all of our cultural organizations participating and offering opportunities for everybody in communities to engage. Last June at the Museums and Dementia Symposium, Dr. Kathleen Welshbaumer, the director of Duke's Alzheimer's Research Center, shared that for the first time in her 30-year career, she feels optimistic about finding a cure for Alzheimer's. She described us as being at a tipping point. But the truth is, we aren't there yet. As our population ages, the rates of dementia are increasing exponentially. Medical professionals are working to find a cure. Until they have it, it is the responsibility of our cultural organizations to provide engaging and appropriate programming for all of our visitors. Museums have found a successful model that engages people with dementia in ways that are productive and important for their self-care. What we need is for our organizations and our communities to have the expectation of us all being inclusive and welcoming for everybody. Thank you.